When was the last time you just sat and listened to people talk about their life and stories? On the boardwalk, Coney Island, Brighton Beach, people are not afraid to talk, very willing to talk. Everybody's got an opinion in this city. One of the most opinionated cities on earth. You never have to ask a New Yorker twice what they think about anything. In fact, you never have to ask them. They'll tell you immediately. I see, so this is all also what gives New York its uniqueness, its color, its vitality. Now, as an asset, these are the reasons I'd live there. Now, if they had none of these qualities, like Dubuque or Casper, Wyoming, well, then I wouldn't live there. Now, Casper I've been to, and it looks like a town that stopped in the 1950s and just kind of got cruddy. But the people are nice, but it's very boring. It doesn't have the Rocky Mountains, that's further over, and it doesn't have the great valleys and Montana. It's kind of stuck in between somewhere. Didn't quite make it yet, you know, it's like, but it's a place for people, you know, who grew up there. I don't know anyone who's actively moving there. You know, there are certain places you move to because there are a lot of assets that it has. Well, what about a person who's living in an asset and doesn't take advantage of it? Well, that's what this is about. Having all these assets inside and not taking advantage of any of them. Having all these things you could be. You could be a healer, you could be a hero, you could be a great lover of life, you could be unconditionally loving, you could be a nurturer, a teacher, you could be a friend, a great friend, you could be creative, you could cast yourself out into this world in 1,000 ways, letting your fantasies become real and trying to see what you can fulfill. All these assets within one person. And none of them are limited by the things we think are limiting. Because the moment you show me something that says you're limited, I'll show you someone who did it, who was, by your definition, limited. No. I have a guy named Rupert Ravens, who was at one point in his life, he was a drug addict. He was an alcoholic, burned himself out, wasted a great young life. He was a top athlete in high school. For about 15 years, he postponed his life while he was engaged in these addictive behaviors. In fact, I just read his story today. He wrote me a story that's going to be published in a magazine. And I called him last night, asked him to write a story. He wrote it and brought it in today. That's what he said right at the top. I was these things. And then he started to pull himself together, realize what he could do. Now he just won in his last 2 weeks. He won a bronze and a silver medal in 2 races. Where before he never thought he could do anything. He thought you had to be young. Now I think he's about 35, and he just won 2 places in 2 races because he started really training hard. And he was a house painter, very gifted artist, but he was painting a house to make a living. And the fumes and all was racking his body and affecting his immune system. So he chose to detoxify, and he did, and cleansed his body. Then he said to me one day, he says, you know, Gary, I just don't have any money. I don't have money to buy vitamins, and I don't even have money to eat organic produce. And I hate the idea of eating pesticide produce. I said, well, call some suppliers and start your own little food co-op. That way you'll get your food for cost. And that's a cost is about a 50% saving, and 50% is cheaper than if you bought it in a supermarket. And so he said, well, just me? I said, well, get a few other people. So he got 10 other people. Then it was 20 other people. 20 other people makes a food co-op. Now they're all getting their produce once a week, now twice a week, and now 0.1 point drop off. Now they got enough to make home deliveries. And they're getting wheatgrass delivered to them fresh. They're getting sprouts. They're getting over 55 different fruits and vegetables delivered, organically grown, certified, at cheaper than if they bought it in a supermarket. So now instead of being helpless and not having the money to buy food, he's buying more food at a cheaper price that's healthier for him than before, because he did something. He did something. He got involved. Now he's got 100 people. And now they're having classes and support group meetings and encouraging one another and doing things together. And now he's doing a whole seminar for himself. In fact, he asked me, could he come down to the ranch and take it over for a week, just he, and bring his own people and do his own thing of other people? I said, sure. So in a period of 4 weeks, he now has art classes, health support groups, a food co-op, which is now, as of next week, will probably be certainly the largest in New Jersey. It'll probably pass Purple Dragon, the food co-op. And knowing him, will go on to be the largest one in the country in about 3 months. Is doing training and has started a running a walking club in southern Jersey for people. And he's doing all this as a community service, but helping himself. It's enriching himself in the process. He's honoring his higher self, the spiritual self. I'd say that's pretty good. In 4 weeks, plus his training, and his body's in perfect shape. I mean, that's something, right? If he could do it, why couldn't you do it? Why couldn't anyone do it? Because look at the background he came from. He could just as easily hang around a bar and say, yeah, you know, but that's not what he chose. He chose to go inside instead of outside. He chose to self-actualize instead of feeling dysfunctional. He chose to enhance the best that he is instead of condemning himself for what he's not. And that is the difference. Now, how have you constructively used these to enhance your beliefs, your reality, and to be the best you can be? And by the way, have you ever asked yourself, what is the best that you can be? Have you? Now, it's either yes you have or no you have, but don't just sit there and don't do anything. All right, what did you come up with? What is the best you could be? Have you thought of yourself, though, in some unlimited way, doing something and fulfilling something that is beyond what you now think is, you know, possible? Have you?
Certain degree.
No, we're not talking about to certain degrees. See, certain degrees means I'll try.
Mm-hmm.
I'll try is the first way that we say, I'm not going to do it. Mm-hmm. Why don't you make a note to yourself that starting tomorrow, you're going to create the ideal self, the ideal job, the ideal relationship. Maybe you have it now. If you do, fine, then honor it. If you don't, then work at it. And that's what you should focus on. That should be your attention and commitment to the higher ideal self. And as long as you have a spiritual self that's guiding you, then it's always coming from unconditional love. You don't do any manipulation, lying, deceiving. You don't do anything that dishonors the human spirit, and hence you don't dishonor other people. There's no hidden agenda. You're open and honest about everything. People either accept it or they don't accept it. Hey, when I do something and say something on the radio, do you think for one moment I stop and think who's going to accept or reject it?
Not at all.
Not for a second. I mean, when I start to say something, I don't think, well, hold on. Now, I didn't really mean that. I meant yes and no. No, I just say it, you know, because I feel it. I have a right to feel this. And if I feel that something constructive can come from it, a dialogue, an understanding, I'm willing to commit myself. Otherwise, we never commit ourselves to anything. We hesitate. We're uncertain. We're uncertain of what we're going to receive. We're uncertain of how we're going to feel. We're uncertain of what we're willing to give up. We're uncertain of what we could lose. We're uncertain of how we're going to feel when we change. What are we going to be like when we change? But that's part of the excitement. I'm changing a major segment of my life over the next 4 months. In fact, by June. I'm shooting for June. I'm putting all kinds of things to happen. I'm going to have a whole lot of new things happen, very exciting new things happening, to reach a lot more people. But to do that, I have to live by my philosophy that I can never take on a new project till I give up an old project. Now think of what would happen if you did the same thing. One day I got a call. I'd worked very hard for 11 months to have the first holistic, gourmet, natural food restaurant in New York City. And I had it. It was called the Fertile Earth. And I had it for 5 years. And then I did something else, and then a Gary's Place. Did any of you ever eat at Gary's Place? That was good food. And it was beautifully presented. It was artistically presented. In fact, I had a chef, a French decorative chef, that all he did was decorate each dish before it came out of the kitchen. Every single dish looked like an art piece. fact, people couldn't believe that basic dishes would be so beautiful, and yet they were. You ate down there, didn't you, Mike? They were beautifully presented, inexpensive. You could buy, I think, any meal for between 10 to 12 bucks. And then one day I got a call and someone said, Gary, how would you like to do a television show? It wouldn't pay anything. In fact, it would cost you about $100,000. And, but you'd be able to reach a lot of people with your message who are not now hearing it. And I said, okay. And the next day, I sold my restaurant. It was that simple. Now, I could have kept the restaurant. I could have kept it. But had I kept it, I would have shown that I needed it as a possession. I didn't need it. I did what I wanted to do. And now, if someone else out there wanted to carry on what I had started, fine. If not, then it had had its time. You know, and life is a matter of things coming and things going, some things staying and being carried on, other things not. If the public is aware of what you're doing and feels that there's a need in their life for something you've created, they'll carry it on. There'll be a demand for it. If there's not, there won't. You know, that's what it comes down to, right? I mean, there's certainly no shortage of fast food joints on every block in the country, but you only find 7 food co-ops in the entire tri-state area. You've got 7 gourmet vegetarian restaurants in, gourmet vegetarian restaurants, not regular restaurants, in Sedona, population 7,000. That's 1 gourmet restaurant for every 1,000 people. You have 1.5 million people living on Long Island. You don't have 1 gourmet restaurant out there. What's it tell you? It tells you the people on Long Island don't want it.
Not true. That's right.
No, it's not the rents are too high. Again, you show me someone who wants it bad enough, and I'll show you someone who organizes to make it happen. Even if you took a little ad out in the paper saying, I would like gourmet food, vegetarian food, why don't you or I get together and see what we can do to form a group that will help put together a natural food restaurant. You get together people with resources, and it happens. But if you don't get together with resources, nothing happens. That's the whole point. You see, nothing happens if you wait for someone out there to do it. Nothing's going to happen out there. It doesn't exist. You exist. Now, it's no different. People in Sedona said, we want a restaurant, and guess what? No one went from New York to Sedona to open a restaurant. Every one of the restaurants were opened by people in Sedona. And I'm willing to bet that they'll open another 10. Now, 10 more would make them have, right now, by the way, they have more gourmet restaurants in New York City, in a town of 7,000. You know, there are buildings in New York City that the first 20 floors have 7,000 employees. And this tells you something. It tells you the people created what they needed. We don't create what we need. You know, and we don't have input in what is created for us. But when I went to do the new project, which I did 165 television programs that aired in Connecticut, New Jersey, Massachusetts. For 6 years, they aired all over this part of the country. And I did that, and it served its purpose. But then when I decided to do the next project, I gave that up and went on to the next project. The idea was, life, you can start, do it, enjoy it, let someone else do it, let it go, and go on and do something else. We've got this idea that that's all you can do now. All right, you've got your niche. You're doing your one thing. Do your one thing. Why? Where's it written? That's the only thing I can do. Now, I'll do something, and then I'll do something else, and I'll do something else, and do something else, and do something else. You know? And every one of you can do the same thing, as long as you don't accumulate. Because the more you accumulate, the less you can do, because the less freedom you have. Then it becomes clutter. It overwhelms you. Just too many things trying to be fit into your life and mind. This way, you let it go, you choose. So now I'm choosing what I'm going to let go of in order to do these new things. And once I've chosen what I'm going to let go of, I'll do a constructive letting go. When I turned over my newsletter to someone and let them carry it on, went on. I took 5 years to get my school accredited. The first school in American history that had holistic curriculum leading to a fully accredited BS nutrition. Faculty, we had at one point of 48, thousands of students, 9 years, And then one day, I said, we've done it, now let's go on. And went on to do something else. That's the way it is. But people, it freaks people out. They think, well, why would you give it up? I mean, there's nothing like it. It's the only one of its kind. Well, because there was a diminishing interest on the part of the public, and I'm not a believer that you should go out there and try to convince people to do something that's in their best interest. If you have to spend more time trying to convince people to do something that's important for them, then it's obvious that they're not people responding to what they should be, and don't fight that. Don't force people to do something that they're not willing and open to do. Let it go. Its time has come or gone or is not now. And you go to where you have people willing to do something. And what's interesting is how many times people finally get around to doing something in New York and then go around the world to places like Fenhorn or other places, and these places are already gone. You know, they've had their day and they're closed or something else has happened. And it's like, well, that was very popular 20 years ago. Yeah, well, 20 years ago I was doing this, not, you know, fine. But there were a group of people who did it and went on. So at some point, you've got to stop being the last one in on things. You get the idea? I mean, try to be there when there's a lot of collective energy enjoying something. How many, I was in the cab the other day. Oh, yeah, no, it was someone in my old building where I lived for 20 years, and it was one of these buildings where I see people and I see them die. You know, how they get old, sick, wheelchair, nurse, incontinent, and death. I never once saw anyone get well. No one ever wanted to do anything, right? It was always inevitable. They thought there was an inevitable course out. You know, and one guy says, oh, you still have your place? Like 20 years ago, his wife said he's going to come up to my farm, right? I said, no, I sold that 10 years ago, a little behind. Oh, really? Well, we were going to. Yeah. This is a guy who was going to do everything and never will have done anything in his life, right? He'll go to do his work, come home, complain, whine, sit there, unemotional, watch television, go to bed, angry, get back up, go to work, same thing. Well, when do we start to get with it? When do we get with what's happening? I mean, there's something happening out there in America, everywhere, here and everywhere. Why should we always be out of the loop? Get into that. And you get into that by having the confidence to get into change in yourself, not being afraid of it, just engaging it, enjoying it, seeing what it is, experiencing it, going on to something else. Now, there's a part of society that says that's irresponsible. It's not. You can have a completely functional life and still experience life. It's that most of the time people are afraid to have two realities at the same time. I believe you can have multiple realities at the same time. You can be inspired by a lot of different things. Every asset has a responsibility that you must honor. So be aware of all the assets that you have, because any asset that you don't honor is not an asset. You know, it's not being used. The whole idea of helping a person who's sick is to help their body help itself heal. There's no drug that heals, but the body heals if you give it what it needs. So honoring the asset of the inner healer, feeding the immune system, not taking anything in that dishonors, feeding the mind, giving the mind what it needs, feeding this, allowing the spirit to feed you. What do you give to each? And look at each of those different assets and ask yourself, how are you honoring each of your natural assets each day? Because any day that you don't give to an asset, you're not using it. You're not making it a part of your natural strength. You know, it's no different than when I was on the airplane coming back. I could have been as fidgety and nervous as that person beside me, but I chose to use an asset that helped me get into the flight and enjoy it. That person chose not to use the asset they have. That's the difference. Even this morning on the reservoir, it's 37 below zero wind chill factor. We were out there doing a speed workout. Now, it's easy as long as you run fast. One person's still out there. You'll find them like this. They were too slow getting Someone said, oh, it's so cold. Why is it so cold? It's not so cold. When you start moving, your body loosens up. Sure enough, 5 minutes later, they were sweating. No? It was the mind, the anticipation. Oh, it's this, so I'm going to feel this, so I'm going to complain about this. Change that perception, and suddenly, whew, ran like a bird. Create a plan to increase the essential assets and limit the necessary liabilities in your life. What can you do on your own to limit the liabilities that keep reappearing in your life? What are some of the liabilities that constantly keep coming up in your life?
People wasting your time.
All right, what can you do about people waste your time?
Eliminate them.
Kill them. Well, you can simply say to people, I'm sorry, but I don't have that time to give you. Now, if they want to be more specific, what you can do is say, I'm sorry, but if you have something constructive for me in my time, I'm willing to be open to it, but it's not going to be what it used to be. It's not just taking my time and assuming that it's there just for wasting. It's not. Oh, I didn't know that you thought I was wasting your time. Yes, let me be very clear. You were wasting my time. And you were wasting your own time. Now, what could you do in that same thing? You'd had the same conversation 100 times with me, going over the same points or emoting the same feelings. It only had to be expressed once. No? What's going to change? There'll be another 100, but now there's not going to be because I'm putting a stop to it. What else? What other liabilities are you facing?
Your own fears.
Your fears. How can you deal with fears?
Difficult.
It's not difficult. If you say it's difficult, then it's impossible. Then you stay at the fear as being legitimate. Most fears are not real. What we really fear is the reaction and the consequences of the fear, and not being able to meet the needs of going beyond the fear. So then the fear itself is not tangible. It's like the woman on the treadmill yesterday who feared that she couldn't do a 7-minute mile. So the moment she thought she was going to do a 7-minute mile, she showed her body couldn't do it. She forced her body not to do something, so her mind created a reality that convinced her body that it was real. But when I tricked her mind, and she'd already done it, then she realized the folly of it. Now that no longer exists. Now there's no fear of going a 7-minute mile. Fear, with very few exceptions, isn't real. When it's not real, you can simply go beyond it, go right through it. It's the anticipation of it. Anticipation of that which we fear that is most gripping to us. It's like I went in yesterday and there was a woman about to get a vitamin drip, but she was waiting out in the hall. I said, why don't you go in the room and sit down? She's, oh, I hate needles, I hate the sight of blood. I'm so terrified of this, I'm so terrified of this. I said, what are you terrified of? She said, well, there's, the pain and all. And so I said, how much pain is there? Tiny little prick of the skin. And she had a mark on her finger, and I said, how'd that happen? She said, oh, and she said, I had something fall on it. And I said, now that was painful. She said, no, that wasn't so bad. I says, you mean you didn't have any reaction to something that could have broken your finger and caused a blood blister, but a tiny little prick on the skin? I said, there's something else there besides that. I said, there is no real pain in it, but you're making the pain more real than what it has to be. I said, why don't you try putting on a headset using a relaxation tape? And so she did. And she didn't have the same fear. This relaxing, this mellowing out. Dentists are using that now too for people who fear getting a tooth drilled. What other fears? Not listening to what? Fear of your intuition, because you've been conditioned to mistrust your intuition. All right, so how do you deal with it? You listen, you actualize it. What other fears? Financial. So what's the worst that could happen? Huh? Yeah, so you get a little cup, or you get a big cup, or you get no cup. So does that change you as a person? Are you going to look different? How? No one can come and take the clothes that's on your back now, right? You like what you're wearing, you wouldn't be wearing them now, right?
Just be a little more dirty.
Why? You mean poor people can't clean their clothes? There's no such thing as washing and drying machines?
Oh, I don't know, but, you know, seriously, you try, I mean, seriously, it is, there's a lot of things I think myself and a lot of people that I know, friends and people here would like to do. I think there's a million things I'd like to do.
Uh-huh.
Not many of them, at least the way I've thought of it at this point, give you any kind, I'm not talking about financially being able to buy a huge condo on Park Avenue. I mean, being able to support oneself in a reasonably comfortable way to match self-actualization and doing things where you're living your life and have an income. I don't see that.
Well, you haven't tried yet. Perhaps what? Either you've tried it and it failed and you've been without any money, or you've tried it and succeeded. Which is it?
No,
Are you doing exactly what you want to do now in life?
No.
No. Have you ever done exactly what you want to do with your life?
no.
No. You haven't tried to be the hero that you are inside or could be. You haven't tried to live an austere existence. I know people who live in ashrams for a period of their life to understand what it means to fully and completely devote themselves to their spiritual understanding. They live with no physical possessions whatsoever. They own nothing. They eat the most frugal diet. They sleep on mats in a communal room about this size, about 70 of them. They get up and they learn other traditions and other spiritual awarenesses, Buddhism frequently. When they feel that they have attained an inner strength that trusts the inner self and connect it to a larger sense of life, they can go back out in the world and try with courage anything they want to do. It's not important where they live. It's not important what they have. It's important what they are.
Sure.
Therefore, whatever they are, they will find kindred spirits who will acknowledge that. There are people in every community in America who are evolving and who've allowed taking the risks of being a human being to also be matched with fulfilling their life desire. Now, in the process, we have 100 times a stumble and 1 times a solid foot. We get our stance, we feel good, we take a step, and we're on uncertain ground. That's with everything that we do. You can't find an artist in this room who hasn't had a million rejections. But we also have some acceptance. What's important is that we continue to believe in ourselves. People are living in the most economically distressed circumstances, but have a completely fulfilling life. I would rather have a fulfilling life and that allows me to feel good about myself as a person on a spiritual, emotional, and physical well-being than to have financial or material security and not have a life. But it takes taking risks. It takes risking everything that we fear. Because if you don't take that chance, then everything you fear, you actualize.